She Karen Morgan? Right, okay. Yeah, no, two cows her.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the community board's meeting for June 27th. It feels like it's been a few months since it's been the first one. Well, it has been for me. So I'll get Ruben to start off with the plate of care, please.
Well, I'll take the mask off for this. I got us a special matariki one for today. So it's matariki te tupua, matariki te tawhito, tau mai te wairua, mai ngā ira atua, ki te ira tangata, tihei mauri.
Thank you for that, Ruben. I do have a few apologies this morning. I have Scott Winter for lateness. Apology from Tyrone Fields and an apology from James Stewart. Move Andrew, seconded by Ruben. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Declarations of interest. If there is any, I'm happy to take those throughout the meeting. Public forum. At this stage, I have nobody here for public forum this morning. So we are on to 25, which is deputations by appointment.
Sorry,
Yes, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, previous minutes. Obviously, I wasn't here, so is it? Can we move those? And Nigel's happy to second them. All those in favour?
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you. Now we'll go on to the deputations by appointment. We have Gay, which is, and yeah, you're welcome to come to enter today. Thank you very much, and Bruce.
Come up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bruce, sorry.
Bruce Glennie.
Bruce Glennie, sorry. Thank you very much, Ben.
Well, welcome to take your mask off while you're talking. So
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. It means a lot to us. We're here about the medical centre and extending that medical centre at Diamond Harbour. And the building that houses the medical centre is now 30 years old and serves a population that's approximately double of that when it was built in 1991. For that reason, not only is the building out of date in many ways, but essentially it's simply too small. There are too few rooms for the functions necessary, not enough space in those rooms, not enough safe storage for drugs and equipment, and inadequate facilities for staff and patients. The toilets aren't suitable for disabled patients. There is no staff room, although there may be up to 5 people at any one time in the centre. Infection control requirements arising from COVID have only made that all the more pressing. As a consequence, the owners of the building, ourselves, the Diamond Harbour and District Health Support Group, contracted an architect who, in consultation with staff, drew up plans that would meet many of the problems now being encountered. It became evident in the development of those plans that trees in the immediate vicinity of the building would need to be removed to allow for the space required. Bruce will describe to you the problems that exist and the fact that we have tried to reduce the need for the removal of trees, but with little success. In the last analysis, we will claim very strongly that the provision of adequate medical and nursing services to our area must remain our priority, and the removal of 2 trees is required to achieve that. Bruce will add weight to the issues around the trees.
Thank you. Gay has covered most of the areas that I will cover, also increasing population, additional patient numbers. The building itself has no proper staff facilities currently. The toilets open directly onto the food preparation and staff room, and no separate area for the staff and nurses to actually sit and have a cup of tea. So the building is inadequate in our current usage. With COVID, the requirements for that, for the separation and isolation of patients coming into and out of the facility, has required that we put 2 rooms in for doctor consultation, so that we can alternate patients' entry into one while consult in the other, and doctor exchange. So patients are not passing each other in the corridor. We employed an architect to come up with the design necessary to meet the requirements, some future proofing of this building as well, and to provide an isolation area with double isolation doors for patients who are contagious, and so that we can exit them to an ambulance without going back through the facility. That's required an extension that is described in the plans that have been submitted. We looked at alternatives when the trees, when we realised that we're impacting the 2 gum trees, the eucalypts at the end of the north side of the building. We looked at an alternative of extending to the west. That would have required a significant excavation into the bank back towards the boundaries on that side, probably to a depth of well over 3 metres, and with significant cost expected because the ground contours are formed by rock underneath the loose. And so also we're constrained by size on that side as well. We looked at decreasing the design out to the north side, but the medical facility felt that that didn't fulfil their requirements. It was too constrained. Going out the east side into the car park area would have restricted ambulance entry, restricted car parking, and so that was not considered a viable option either. So we finished up with the design as done by Peninsula of Buck Architects, and that impacts 2 trees out on the north side of the building, 2 eucalypts. And regrettably, if that design is the one that we have to proceed with, then those trees would have to go. Part of that process, we would enter into a landscaping plan arrangement and mitigation as in any way we can with planting once the construction is completed, to soften what we've done and to enhance the area with additional planting. And there will be additional car parking in the lower area with planting along the boundaries of there as well, to soften and to screen the parking from other residents in the area. And so our proposal is that Denis's plan is the one that we wish to proceed with, on the north side with the separate isolation room, and that the 2 trees do be removed. And thank you for your time for the presentation.
Does anyone have any questions? Any questions? For...
No, pretty clear, I think.
No, if you don't have a question at this stage?
Who, me?
Yeah, you don't have a question for either of these 2?
No, I had everything. I went to the meeting on last week, and we had a very good discussion about what was needed and what was done, and it was very informative. So thank you very much, and fully supportive of that.
Yep. Thank you both for coming along this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
What are we need to do at this stage?
We've got one more presentation and we'll take on to the report. So next up I have Ed Costello.
Oh,
Yeah, welcome to come to the end of the table so we can all see you.
yeah, no problem. I'm sure there's better things to look at than my face, but
No, but it's okay.
you asked for it.
Thank you.
Oh, first of all, I want to apologise. I had COVID a few weeks ago, and my chest is still recovering, so I will be breathing probably heavily, and it's not going to be pretty. Cool. So I'm just here today to speak on behalf of some of the community and some of the neighbours of the medical centre directly. We have quite a big community feel in our area, and we really feel that getting involved in it is something that we would have expected from the start. My first time hearing about the plans to remove the trees was when I accidentally went to the AGM. I thought I was going down to my first meeting to the community association just to see what it was about, but then I realized they were voting in and voting out people. It was a bit of a shock. I spoke to my neighbours because I knew when I came out, I had a look at those trees and I could see there might have been an issue, and I spoke to Mike, who was sitting here, and Nancy, who couldn't make it today because she is in Hawaii. So I don't think she's too worried. But I just have some notes that I want to read out for people, really just to kind of point out where our issues have been, where our issues are, and I've got some questions I'd like to be answered at some stage as well, if it's possible. So excuse me while I read. First of all, thanks for allowing me to speak. This is a massive issue for us, very important to us, and I appreciate the time that you've given us to voice them. I also appreciate the time that the medical centre team have given to me in our many discussions that we managed to be able to get together, some phone calls and some face-to-faces. I just want to say, first of all, I'm speaking on behalf of Nancy Vance. She'll be the first person I'll be speaking with, and the next one will be Mike O'Neill, who's sitting just there. And at this point, I want to make it clear that we are not against any of the upgrades of the medical centre, quite the opposite. I moved to the area specifically to get involved in a community. So when I had my kid, I would have a community to make her grow up in, and give her that feel that I grew up in when I was younger. So I'll start with Nancy's. So kia ora, hello. Apologies that I cannot attend this meeting. Who am I? My name is Nancy Vance. My family and I have been associated with the Diamond Harbour Medical Centre for over 15 years. We are patients of the wonderful medical practice. We are patients of the wonderful medical practice staff, and we are members of the health support group. We are volunteers when the landscape work at the centre needs hands-on deck, and we are neighbours living previously at number 6, which is where I live, and now at 8 Waipapa, which is now right beside. For all of those years. I am a landscape architect by profession, working with design, planning and resourcing consent issues for over 20 years. And like all residents of the Stoddart Point, my family values and enjoys the community spirit in our neighbourhood, the history around us, and the flora and fauna that knits it all together. So why do I submit a note to the committee? The Diamond Harbour and District Health Support Group plans pamphlet shows removal of 2 mature gum trees. At the time when she wrote this, it was 3, and in the meantime, they have let us know that the main tree at the front and is still going to be kept.
Immediately after you,
Okay, I'll see you now.
but I'll plan to come down.
Sorry, I thought someone was speaking to me. Support group pamphlet shows the removal of 2 mature gum trees, and as part of the centre redevelopment, and I have concerns about the following. Number 1, my neighbours and I are affected by design options shown in the pamphlet. These trees provide wind shelter from the northeast to the houses, on the ridge and on the valley of Stoddart Point. Number 2, the trees provide safe perching for a large number of bellbirds, cararoo, and other fauna that we are likely to share this area with. The morning and evening hours are phenomenal, and I can attest to that. That's literally every morning is what I get to live with, and we love it. Number 3, we would like to be part of the discussions about the redevelopment process. These trees do not have heritage listing. They are not protected formally in the district plan, and they are some distance from the Stoddart Cottage to be associated with the building's historic classification. However, these trees are in a public reserve and associated with the shelter belt of the blue gums planted by the Stoddarts behind the cottage in the 1840s. The belt historically spanned across the valley behind the cottage and behind the now Memorial Hall, and furthermore behind 8, 6, 4, and 2 of Waipapa Avenue. The medical centre is situated in this belt and would like to have been informed about the proposal and to understand the design options. What I'd like to see for going forward. Friendly and open discussion between the DHDSHG, if that's correct, and the medical centre neighbours about what our shared interest in this development is. And it really is shared interest. It's something that we are very keen on. To consider design options that may not require tree removal. An arborist report to determine tree health and longevity. If healthy, let's keep them and maintain them. Number 4, to understand whether there is indeed approximately $20,000 for tree removal in the budget, or whether this money is better spent on building design and consenting process. Thank you very much, and hope to be able to get more involved in the future. So just moving to Mike's statement now. So just an introduction to Mike. Mike has been living in the Diamond Harbour area and on Waipapa Avenue for the last 35 years. Mike's wife actually spearheaded the fundraising campaign at the start when that original medical centre was built. Excuse me, while I just moved to his one. Cool. So these trees are part of the, and this is just bullet points, these trees are part of the heritage of the original Diamond Harbour. There are caribou and bellbirds in these trees all day. These trees have a large selection of native birds in them all day long and are part of the bird's food source and roosting. Trees can't be removed on the assumption that something may happen in the future. This is in reference to some stuff that has been said to us in the past, which was that there was some tie with the Australian blue gums and that. I just want to put in, and this isn't Mike's in with it, but he actually puts it in after this, that in Australia, in subprime conditions, in drought year after year after year, those trees only live a certain length of time and they also can have issues. In prime conditions like New Zealand, where we don't have droughts every single year, they don't have that issue. There's no proven no proven instances of it or any studies made on it. There is, however, lots of studies on how long these trees can live in New Zealand. What is the life of a gum tree in New Zealand? It must be at least 200 years, and then what I have found is between 200 to 400 years. There is a council protected gum tree in Morgan's Gully, which is 160 years old and still very healthy. It's got a plaque on it and it's there and it's historically going to be kept. Mike has a photo of it there for proof. There has been no necessity to remove trees around the hall in Stutter's Cottage. So in the disposition that they mentioned, they never really mentioned anything about the issue with the trees, but in some of our discussions, they mentioned that some of the trees might be too old or might have issues. But what we're stipulating is that there is 20, 30 other trees there that aren't going to be touched. So why aren't they being looked at as well if these trees have health issues? And that's what we've been told coming up to this point. There's been no necessity to move any of the trees around Stoddard Cottage. There have been major builds in the hall in the area in the past, and the trees are just as close buildings and are original Diamond Harbour gum trees and of a similar age. Would they be removed as well if age is being used as a reason? The Diamond Harbour support group state that once EP Community Board approves the trees removal, they will go for the council for building approval. From what we could see, Mike is agreeing that there is no money for the build as it stands now. From what they had shown us the other day, that there is not 600,000 that we were told that will cost to build. I think there was a 25 grand donation recently, but we just don't see the money for the rest of the build. And that comes into what I'm saying later. There appears to be no effort in trying to preserve the existing native surroundings in their new build. What protection is there to ensure that the trees don't get cut down and then no build because of lack of funds? So I have that issue as well. I'm just afraid that the trees will be cut down and suddenly the funds won't appear, and then that's a complete waste of work. What protects a build to the south end of the centre is far more environmentally friendly, and there are no restrictions due to surrounding its environment. They have made an assumption on the south side being a more expensive build. There is no engineer's report on the south side build. There is no evidence that a build to the south would be more expensive, and a build to the north side of the building would require retaining walls. There have been no engineer's reports that we are aware of on the build that have retaining walls would be required with the proposal. I'm sure there are building practices that have minimal damage on surrounding environment that would require no trees to be removed. So thanks, Mike, for putting that together. And then just coming to me, I'm not going to have a long one either. I know I've been speaking for a long time. I'm aware I only get 10 minutes, so I'll speak as quick as I can. So the biggest thing for me is community. I really feel that we were left out of this completely. And I'm not saying it was on purpose. but we have not been contacted at all. We are the only people, and I'm speaking on behalf of everybody in that area, that are actually directly affected by the work that's happening. It's great that the community centre or the Diamond Harbour Medical Centre is going to be improved and the whole community gets to get some involvement and get some benefit from it. But it's our houses that are infected straight away, regardless of everything. We haven't been contacted. We haven't had anything, any sort of meetings with the team where we've all been able to voice our opinions and go to it. It's being me having to chase for information. I dare think if I wasn't at that AGM, I might not have found out about it until it was too late. I would request, and I have requested in the past, that we get to sit down together, we have a discussion and we work through it ourselves and see if there's other designs that we can do to incorporate it. The main reasons that I have issues with the trees is, for me, nature is a huge important thing for me. And like I said, every day I hear those birds overhead, roosting, doing everything that they do. And that's a consistent thing all day, every day. And they're in those trees constantly. Those two trees are also part of, as they said, a shelter belt. And that is literally, the easterly will come straight into my back garden and will ruin everything pretty much that I've had in it. And we can prove it or not prove it, but it is just what's going to happen. What I would like as well from it is, I don't think there should be any approval for the trees to be cut down until all the consents and engineer reports have been completed. I've requested that there's an ecological impact report be made to see what is actually the ecological impact of the area for these trees to be cut down, what nature are they currently supporting and what will it affect. I've asked for geotech reports for the surrounding banks that are going to be affected. Speaking with Bruce the other day, I mentioned that if you were removing those trees have a root system that will be the same as the crown of the tree. If you look at that, that comes right underneath Mike's part of the bank. And if they're going to remove those trees, what happens when that root structure either is removed or it is broken down over the years? What happens to that? That's another thing that's very important to us, because that's our properties, it's where our families are, and we don't want anything like that to happen. I would request that anything before trees are given the approval, that a geotech report is done on the area and we have access to that. I would love a meeting with you folks as well privately, with myself, Mike, and whoever else is affected at the time, just so we can have an open discussion about it, and you can feel free to ask as many questions as you want, or even put your points across to us, make us change our mind. And finally, I just don't know if there's any other designs have been completed. Maybe I haven't been given the information, but I've only seen one design. I've been told it's a rough sketch, but yet we're speaking about it as if it's a final document. It's very important to me. I moved to the area for a reason. I moved to that house because it has everything that I wanted, and removal of those trees puts my house in jeopardy, in my opinion, until I know experts have told me that it doesn't. There's ecological impact that I want looked at, and then there's just the fact that we have not been discussed or anything has been done. So my big request is that involve the community in your designs and in your discussions, please.
We appreciate your time. Does anyone got any questions for you directly at this time? We appreciate the information you've given us, and we appreciate you've made yourself available this morning. So
yeah, I appreciate the time. Sorry for hearing me speak for a lot. I had to ramble a bit, but it's, as you can see, it's very important to us. And when we've got information, and again, I'm not saying this is on purpose, but we have had to chase for the information. I've had to call the members a few times, probably have an idea a couple of times, and I know I have an idea probably a couple of times to try and get information. We've had good conversations when this happened, but we need to just make it more, let's organize it and let's get involved, please. Thank you.
Okay, so we will look at bringing the item 11 forward. So staff, in relation to this, welcome to the table. Good morning. So we are now on to item 11, just regarding the trees.
Thank you. So yeah, here to answer more questions or I'm Grant, the leasing consultant, and Jonathan.
Jonathan Hitson from the practice.
So I guess my first question to Jonathan would be, within the report, it did say that we were going to get more information verbally regarding shelter, and what does that look like? So,
Okay, so I think it's kind of maybe just starts from just confirming the property. So the property is not actually in the reserve. I suppose is probably where we want to start. So that's kind of meant it's gone down a different path. So it's basically, it is considered really just a private property. So I guess, there is a chance that it would have that effect on, say, the, blocking northeasterly winds. But at the end of the day, there's not really much that we can do about that because it is considered a property. So if it was in the reserve, I guess we would probably consult on it differently. I guess, yeah, so that's where we are today. Did you want to add anything about the...
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it just has an overlay in the district plan. And I'm not sure why that's there, but it is. And so that's why we're treating it as a park under the definition of the Local Government Act. But the land itself's not held as a reserve, or it's just a freehold title that council owns. So we were sort of erring on caution by treating it as a park and bringing it to the board.
We've obviously had this morning, you have had raised several times before about the effects on neighbouring properties should these 2 trees be removed. What does that look like on the ground? Have you guys had a chance to look at that? And obviously in the report it does say there was going to be a tree management plan going forward and what that looks like. Can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah. So before this went ahead, because we thought it was a reserve, we got the independent assessment done on the trees, which has kind of been a bit of a guide for us through this whole process. In terms of the wind protection, I mean, there are a lot of other mature trees around, but then saying that, I guess you could just face maybe opening up, say, wind tunnels. So yeah, it's something to think about. And at the same time, I know the landscaping that's going to happen, that will help mitigate it. I guess we've just got to be realistic and know that there will be, time for that canopy to grow. So yeah, in short, there's no easy answer to that one.
No, John.
This comment that was brought up about I'm very interested in the biodiversity on the peninsula. The sustaining bird life. I can't understand how that would happen. Do you guys okay to comment on that? It's not enough trees. Do you know, Howard, or someone? You guys, the bird life.
I would say birds have wings, so they fly elsewhere.
Well, they don't. My observation of pines and gums, they're being foreign, don't add a lot to the biodiversity. That's all.
I don't know.
Personal opinion on that.
Any questions for staff?
Okay.
There was also mention of, I'll come to you in a second, Andrew. You're actually, Andrew, go now. Question.
So I've got a number of questions. In terms of decision making, the community board has got delegations and is required to consider, this is a question, I'm just checking if this is the case, both the preferred building option and the removal of the 2 trees because of the lease and the community board's particular approval role under that lease as landlord.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you've got the delegation to approve the improvements, and as a product of that, it involves the trees being removed as well.
Yeah. So I mean, what we've got is a reasonably high level being outline plan of the improvements that are proposed. There's obviously some detail that will be developed up as time goes on. But in staff's view, we've got the required level of information in this report to give the 2 approvals.
Yes, there's no further information that we could we believe we can provide to.
And the information that you have been able to provide is sufficient to support the decision that we're making today under the LGA?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so there's obviously been some question raised, and this follows on from Nigel's question. It may be a staff question that staff can or can't answer. If you can't, I understand. If the trees were removed, are there adequate sites in the immediate neighbourhood for birds to be perching, roosting, nesting and feeding?
Okay, we do have, I think it's an ornithologist in the parks unit. So yeah, if I guess I'd have to go through Grant, but you know, if
We
that
need
was
someone-
something you wanted to look at, we could get it's Andrew Crossland to look at that.
Yeah.
You know, if you wanted some certainty around the impact.
Yeah, if we needed some specialty advice on that.
How many other trees of the same nature and offering the same facility to birds, if you like, are there in the immediate neighbourhood?
I mean, there are a lot of mature gums and pines around there, so yeah, I'm getting the
Can we say 20?
Yeah.
About 20.
okay, yeah, in the row.
Okay,
So yeah, I guess, you know, that'll be a consideration that the ornithologist would make as they see where else do the birds go.
I mean, maybe that we can anticipate what the answer would be. Now, there seems to be some doubt on the part of some of the residents as to whether the build will actually proceed. Certainly there was some doubt expressed in the deputation. Do we know whether the trees will only be removed if the development actually goes ahead? So if it's consented to go ahead, or is there some protection that could be put in place to allow decision making today that gives the approval for the trees to go, but only in the event that the development actually proceeds? I mean, an outcome that I wouldn't want to see is that the trees are removed for what turns out to be no reason.
I mean, you could make that a part of your
Yeah.
recommendation.
So conditional
Upon
the consenting of the building.
and
Okay, and from a timing point of view, that wouldn't hold the build up because of if the decision's already made but contingent on, then that means that as soon as the plans are approved, the tree removal could go ahead, but it removes the suggestion that the trees might be removed and the building never gets built.
that's a prudent idea that
Yeah,
could be
all right,
incorporated
right.
into the resolution some way to give the satisfaction.
Yeah, so I'm happy for us to pick that up as we come to decision making. Geotech report. Will a geotech report be required for the build?
I'd have to ask the
Say so.
Is a consenting matter?
would be potentially.
We will be employing a structural engineer, Steve Barrow, to do the structural work, and he would get whatever geotech information he would require to carry out his engineering work for
Yes.
the building.
As part of the
Yeah.
consenting, as part of the building consenting.
Yes, it will
process.
and be done prior to the building consent application.
So then the follow-on question from that, and it responds to the question in the deputation. Would the group be happy to share that geotech report and its contents with local residents, or would it in fact be publicly available anyway as part of the consenting process?
Yes, absolutely, Sheriff.
Thank you. I think that is everything. Thank you.
Covered my questions, Andrew. Howard, you've got a question. For the team?
Yeah, probably a bit. I understand both sides of the argument. I understand the neighbours' concerns about wind tunnelling in the easterly, which can be a real. I can't find a word that's appropriate on a public channel in these areas. And I
Nightmare is
do-
good.
Challenging.
I do love my trees thing, and I also understand the need for the medical centre to expand. What I'm questioning is it possible for wind mitigation to be assessed by obviously an air expert or something like that? And as the medical centre is built in a bit of a hollow below the bank and the upper bank, and if we put fencing above on that bank, would it lower the effect on the neighbouring properties while new vegetation was growing. Is that a possibility to look at, or am I right out on, possibilities?
Like, point out to one of them.
Hang on, I've got questions. So, Grant, any ideas on what that looks like? Can we, as the landlord, can we stipulate anything like that? I mean, around landscaping and mitigations? I mean, just like Andrew was rightly saying, would love to be able to say that the trees.
Yep.
Is there anything around landscaping and sheltering
Yeah.
of neighbouring properties? Because of course this would have an impact in whatever that looks like. But can we say that mitigating factors are incorporated in landscaping?
I think
Even though they're not going to be.
Anyone?
Best thing would be the landscape architect. I think you've got working on the design. And basically to discuss with them, how, I guess, from their perspective, how we could mitigate it.
Yeah, can I comment from a practical point of view? Fencing along the eastern side is probably not going to provide a great deal of protection from what you are talking about. They're looking at the protection from a higher canopy because they are well above the vertical centre and horizontal profile.
Okay, no, I further down. So, okay, thank you.
Those trees are about 35 metres high. I can't tell you how wide they cover.
But it could be something. My question to Grant is that could be something covered in leasing development in the area that a landscape does take into effect.
You could, if it was, I'd be saying who's going to be bearing the cost for that would be the first thing to think about. As landlord approving some plans, you can require some stipulations if it's, I guess, if they're practical, and they can deliver the outcomes you're looking for.
So Howard, does that kind of roundabout
Yeah.
way?
No, I was looking at it in a easy, temporary sort of situation, but obviously these properties are above the medical centre, so they won't. No temporary things. You're going to have to deal with the wind until new, foliage grows. Unfortunately.
Have you got any further questions, Howard?
No, not at this stage. I'm more once we start discussing the actual submission. I'm just a bit concerned with part of that. What we're agreeing to is we open to that discussion at the moment.
We can, if you're going to ask questions regarding the report, that's what we're here for. So, have you got another question regarding the report?
Just what we're agreeing to. I'll flip back to where we. In the recommendations, under clause 2, section B, where the second sentence says the TPMP shall ensure that no damage to remaining trees and shrubs on the site during the construction period. I'm just a bit concerned about the word shrubs, because this whole report and whole discussions have been about the trees. And then suddenly we were brought in some shrubs, and I'm a bit concerned because the area where the property, the new build's going to be built, there are actually some shrubs that need to be relocated. So I was just wondering if we could remove that word shrubs from that second word and just concentrate this whole discussion about the trees. I'm just concerned that they get the build and then someone comes along and says, oh no, you're not allowed to actually remove those shrubs from the foundational area.
Okay. Maybe, we could possibly change it so refer to maybe vegetation removed.
I'm just to make sure that the foundation area, there's a couple of shrubs that they're going to move to the back of the area because obviously they're growing where the building is going to be built. But there's no actual allowance in this report to allow those shrubs to be removed. But you've said specifically that no shrubs can be damaged during the build. Well, these shrubs are going to be damaged, unfortunately, if they're left there.
come through from the arborists. So, yeah, we could just refer in the perhaps something along the lines of vegetation in the building footprint to be removed. Yeah. Or trees and the.
Yeah, I just don't want it to come back later on that someone
Yeah.
stands up and says, hey, you can't actually do this.
Ambiguous.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Howard.
happy with the shrubs. Yeah.
Does anyone have any further questions regarding the report? Taking in light that we are going to add something in line with what Andrew was saying before, but any other questions regarding the report in front of us? If not, we'll look at the recommendations. Oh, Howard, you don't have any further questions that you've
No.
got your, no, okay, thank you. Now, have you got some wording there, Andrew, or?
We can come up with something reasonably easy, regulates the law. Removal of the 2 trees is shown, subject to, I think we just had a D. So subject to consents for the proposed building being granted. Required consents for the proposed building being granted.
That means that.
In fact, we'll say all of the, so, all of the required consents for the proposed building being granted. So that means that if we were to agree that the trees are able to be removed, as set out in the recommendation, that could only happen once all of the consents have been granted and therefore we made it possible for the building to be built.
Yeah, Grant, are you happy with that wording, or would you like it amended further?
I think that makes sense because D that maximum scheme will approve, yep, subject to, so D would be a part of that subject to. Yep.
It just adds another condition.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable with that.
That trees don't get removed unless it is actually going. Funding as well. Andrew, did you want funding? You don't want to put funding.
And well, we could say, and confirmation that the required funding is in place. Yeah, because consent might be granted, but it may not be funded. Yeah.
Can I speak to that, please?
Sorry, I was speaking to our staff.
I'll put the question through staff in that case, then, if I can. In doing that, we just need to be careful that there isn't an unintended outcome that this then delays the construction of the building once it's consented and funded. Could that be the case? Would that be the case?
If perhaps if it was funded in stages, or there was
That's helpful.
the fundraising hadn't been completed before the works had started.
All right.
I understand the intention, though.
Can we just make it that trees are removed just prior to the laying of foundations?
But that's the sign off the consent.
I'm happy, having what I've heard, I'm happy to remove that part of that funding.
Yeah, okay. So
Because there's an unintended outcome that we could end up delaying the construction of the building beyond. Yeah, so let's just remove.
Yep.
So make me the mover of this, given I'm the one that's added to
and
it.
you are happy with the rest of the
I'm happy with
recommendations?
the rest of it, and remove the funding part because it creates an unintended outcome for the group.
Okay. So we've got a mover by Andrew. Anyone else like to second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you, Howard. So we've got a mover and seconder. Is there any further discussion?
Sorry, Madam Chair, did we want to change or remove shrubs from 2 feet for Howard's?
Okay, so Grant, how do you feel about removing shrubs?
I
from
think,
that?
Jonathan, you are happy with that. It's but possibly some wording that's come through from the arboricultural report.
Okay.
It's really about trees. There's no shrubs on there that we couldn't,
Significance.
we would miss.
Yeah.
Is there?
Okay, so we can remove
No,
the
I mean,
end shrubs.
Yeah.
So Andrew is the mover, is happy to take out the words end shrubs.
Can we just get a copy of the resolution in front of us as well?
Okay,
I
and
just want to see what we're agreeing to.
yeah, and Howard, obviously, we're talking about the removal of the shrubs, the wording of shrubs within that. Was what you suggested earlier anyway,
There is no damage to remaining trees.
on the site during the,
So we're saying that we're comfortable with damage to shrubs, but not trees.
there's a few shrubs in the footprint.
Oh, I see it too.
But that's the bigger picture. I mean, it's the, obviously there'll be shrubs within the footprint of the area, but it's the bigger land. From what I understand from the trees in reading the report, it's the any damage to anything else in the area must be mitigated.
But it doesn't say that. What it says is we're only discussing the removal of.
Ensure there is no
tree-
damage to the remaining trees or shrubs in the area. So that's the bigger impacts.
If we take our shrubs out, it means that we're comfortable with damage to shrubs.
Well, this report's only discussing the trees though.
So do we need to put in outside the footprint? Does it help outside the footprint of the building?
That's it basically is,
Yeah.
I guess as the landlord, we're saying that, if it's not involved in the project and damage can be avoided, then that's what we want, isn't it?
So we want to put in the words outside the footprint of.
Yeah,
That's fine.
Yeah. So Howard, you're okay with that?
Yeah, that's good. That solves that.
Yeah.
big
Yeah,
concern.
that's good, because I don't want to be removing protection.
No. Of proposed. On the. Yeah. So there is no damage to the remaining trees and shrubs outside the building footprint on the site during the construction
We
period.
haven't got an unintended outcome there, where, for example, construction of car park or associated works is outside the footprint of the building, but
That's part of the construction of what is thought. but let's say-
outside the footprint of the project.
Okay,
One of them current, I know, 'cause that's in the
so
building.
what does,
Tree number one is on cover. Tree number one will be.
Yeah, rather than outside of the project footprint.
Yeah.
Because
no damage to remaining trees.
like so there is more
Outs-
car parking being approved?
Could be a pathway.
Yeah, but like I say. Ensure that, and like I said, there is the word there that ensure, it's not a, like I said, you want to protect everything else in the area as much as possible, and I think that's the unintended outcome, as you're saying, Andrew, is any further damage than that absolutely needs to
We
be.
just need to be careful. I don't want anybody needing to come back to us in
Yeah.
future because we're going to go this time.
Howard, are you okay with that?
Yeah, no, that's good. It's just mainly I didn't want the build held up by someone coming along and saying, "Hey, look,
There's a
that
shrub
rose
in the way,
has-
yeah.
I think we
has historical significance."
Thank you, Howard. We appreciate the, yeah. Okay, so we've got a mover of Andrew and a seconder of Howard. Is there any further discussion we need to have? Okay, Andrew.
Thank you. So I went out there a couple of weeks ago and had a look, and I wanted to go and have a look so that I knew exactly what we were talking about before we granted these approvals today. I know that there's a need for us to do something, and I know there's some contention around it with the immediate local residents. I mean, having been through that building, it's pretty clear that the medical centre is at best constrained, possibly more likely inadequate for its current use, particularly in COVID times and in what's going to be a long-term ongoing post-COVID environment where these sort of facilities do need a bit more flexibility than they've had in the past. So I totally get the need for the proposed extension to the building. And removing trees is something that I wouldn't generally be a supporter of, but there's a real balancing act here. We need to consider the practical matter of the need, and I think it is a need to extend the medical facility and the benefit to the wider community, and balance that with the effect of the proposed loss of the two mature gum trees and the effect of that on a smaller number of immediately local residents. So, I commend the group working on the medical centre for their commitment to the landscape and for enhancing the balance of the site in connection with the existing building, with landscaping to soften and screen the effects and the activities along with the building. At the same time, I do understand and accept the views of the local residents, as we heard very clearly in the deputation this morning, realising that that came from a number of residents. And I understand the considerations and reasons for those views, but you know, I'm confident that alternatives have been properly considered as alternatives to the current proposal. It's a reasonably constrained site for a number of reasons. I'm glad that we've changed the resolution so that we make sure that the trees are only removed in the event that the building works actually go ahead. We're not approving the removal of the trees, and then we end up with a situation where the trees are gone and the benefits to the community from the extension to the medical centre don't accrue. So I guess what I'm doing is upweighting the outcomes sought for the whole community from the extension of the medical centre because of that broader community benefit, and that regrettably means that I do agree that the 2 trees in the event the building goes ahead need to go, which leaves me in favour of the resolution today.
I'd like to say something in support of that. You know, coming from Akaroa and watch what Akaroa went through to get their health centre up and running, and how vital it's been for the community resilience particularly through the COVID times, and how it's been able to strengthen and grow the community. I think the need for those facilities are very, very important.
Thank you, Nigel. A few things I'd just like to continue on with, much like Andrew said. The health centre is a vital asset to the community, and we all would like to see that progressed. However, the immediate neighbours should have, and perhaps in future, be brought into the project early on in the piece so that they have input as to what the effects may be of their property. Because it was fantastic to see that the medical centre had gone out far and wide regarding the information out to the community. Perhaps more targeted approach in the immediate area may have been better and brought up issues earlier on for us to deal with. So, like I say, a little disappointed, but we learn these things, and it would be nice to see if the neighbours immediately around the medical centre that do use the asset can be brought into the project even now, so they can all help together moving forward with the benefits and the outcomes for the community. I am happy to support the resolution as well, that we have made a few minor changes. So anything else, Ruben or Howard? No. Okay, so we have got a mover and seconder. And mover and seconder. So we just ask about the resolution. So we have a mover and seconder. So we ask that all those in favour say aye.
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 Opposed? That is carried. So thank you to the team. We do understand that this is a tricky one because it's not on reserve, it's on, yeah, it is a hard one, and we do realise there is multiple effects in the community in both aspects. So hopefully we can find a resolution that helps everybody. But no, thank you both for being part of this morning and helping. Hopefully we can help the other community members. Thank you. Right, so going back to 7, yep. So
Thank you.
thank you. Right, now back on to item 7, just reserve management meeting minutes. Page 13.
Hi folks, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Right. I'd be in touch maybe to have a meeting with you guys in around that project at some stage, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, so we've got received minutes from the following RMCs, Our Eating in Stanley Park.
I just had a question on that.
Yes.
What's the quorum for our?
The meeting, the committee is only 6, so the quorum would be 3. It is a small committee. So that's how that one works. It is very, very small, unlike some of the other committees we have. And at that stage, we did have 4. Any questions regarding these minutes? Otherwise, I'll ask for a mover and seconder. So Nigel's happy to move. Ruben's happy to second. If there's no other discussion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried, thank you. 8, we have the Norman Kirk Memorial Participation Update.
Jewel in the crown.
Good morning, Tricia. And others.
Hi, yeah, got
Right, does everybody know Ben and Rowan? So Ben Rivasky is
That's
the,
not familiar.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
Ben Roscoe, I'm Operations Manager for Recreation Sport.
and I'm Rowan, I'm the Aquatics Manager for the council, yeah, for recreation sport.
Kia ora, welcome.
Nice to be here.
so have we got the PowerPoints? Katie?
You can while you're talking, yes.
Oh, great.
yes. Yeah, so like I say, to understand that it's hard to try and talk through.
So while we're trying to get the PowerPoint, so this update is to provide you with an overview, if you like, of progression to date and what's been achieved to increase participation and initiatives at the Norman Kirk Pool. So you would have received the report that we provided, an update of the information, as well as the pay-to-play review, which was the review of access for casual users. So today we're going to share some of those highlights from those 2 briefs. So if you go to the second slide, Katie, please. So we'll just start off with giving you a brief timeline of access. So if we start in 2016, we had 8 time bank lifeguards trained by council as part of our membership to Time Bank with Project Littleton. And due to changing New Zealand water safety guidelines, this became too difficult to continue. So we had to look at other ways of trying to manage that. So in 2017, 2018, we introduced the key system, which allowed, or the swipe card system, which allowed access from 7 AM to 8 PM. Actually, no, it's 7 PM, isn't it? Not 8 PM. Yeah, I got that wrong. Yeah. And then in 2019, 2020, there was feedback from the community that for those that didn't want to buy a full membership and weren't here during the Christmas time, they wanted to have a 2nd tier membership. So that was introduced in 2019, 2020. So basically now from 2020 onwards, entry is available for casual users when accompanied by a key holder. So they can, that option's there as well. And this season, actually, there was a reduction in costs as well for the swipe card, the key. So it went from 160 down to 140 for a full membership. And then the 2nd tier went from 80 down to 60. And that was basically because the key holders were doing a lot of the cleaning. And so that cut down on the costs for those keys, swipe cards. So if we go to participation levels, so Rowan, do you want to?
Yeah, I can just give you a quick overview of the participation for the last 5 years. As you can kind of see from the numbers there, overall it's been reasonably steady, which is great. And just starting at the bottom line there, I think that's the first year in 2017-18 that we had the membership system. So I guess the trends have started from them, and you'll see that the number of keys sold was quite high and it went down from there, but the number of participations was quite low and has increased a lot since then. So I think probably with all the enthusiasm of advocating and starting a new key system, there was a lot of people that bought in but then didn't probably use the pool as much as they thought. So there's a bit less after that, but gone up to 9,500 participations in 2018, and then in the 3 years since, obviously it's been a roller coaster ride with COVID. But sort of luckily the way that things have gone, it hasn't affected the summers as much as it has, and sometimes during the winters. So yeah, so it's kind of leveled out at about 9,500, and then last year a little bit less than that. But we did have sort of Omicron wave in February and March, and we're in alert level 2 for the whole summer before that. So it's understandable that that's a little bit lower.
Although the other thing I did see in the report that weather did have also an impact. Being a cooler summer, all the pools noticed a decrease in usage. That was pointed out during our agenda setting that,
Yeah.
you know, why is it slower, but I noticed that all pools over this last summer, because it was that bit cooler,
Yeah.
a lower number of participations. It wasn't just the normal.
That's right. It wasn't funny summer that it just didn't have those blazing hot days, you know, like those 30-degree days, which is really the swimming pool days. So yeah, there's a few less of those, I think.
So that had just as much of an impact, as well as, you know, obviously COVID setting, but
Yeah.
having those weather peaks not being as high as previous summers.
Yeah.
Like I say, just looking at this slide saying the total participation is down a little bit,
Mm.
that would make sense with the weather not being as blazingly hot.
Oh, the next slide. So if we look at initiatives that we've worked on during the last few years, in 2019, 2020, 8 full memberships were funded. So Project Littleton raised funds for 4 memberships, and the Recreation, Sports and Events Unit matched this offer. From that offer, we approached 4 key organisations in Littleton who we thought would most benefit, and that was the primary school, the community house, the medical centre and the kindy. So I worked alongside them to distribute those memberships to who they thought would most benefit. This last season was a bit different because Project Littleton were unable to have their garage sales because of COVID, obviously, so they weren't able to host as many. So it was agreed by us all that instead of trying to have a goal of trying to raise that funds for full memberships, what we would do is raise money for 100 casual user, you know, pool pass memberships sort of thing, casual swim passes, that's the word. So we then went back to those previous organisations and distributed those swim passes to them. And then on top of that, we had just about 12 left. So we approached the seafarers, the Project Littleton themselves, garage volunteers, the strength and balance class for older adults, and the re-established youth group. And we gave them 4 casual swim passes each. And this initiative is hopefully going to continue. I know Project Littleton is still very keen to provide those passes, as are the Recreation, Sports and Events Unit. So the next slide, we know that the board provided funding, a grant to open during the weekends in 2019, 2020 until the end of February for casual users. And just a note that those were the participations that we had during those times. So we only had 36 casual users during those extra 8 days, just to be aware of. The next slide. So this last season, we looked at activating the space, bringing people to the pool rather than opening it and seeing if people came. So this season, we trialled a hydro-size class aimed at older adults. It was to be a 6-week program, but due to difficulties finding a tutor, it turned out to be only a 4-week program. So Sport Canterbury supported the program financially, and we covered the lane hire, and the Rec and Sports team provided free training and support to the tutor to make this all happen. So again, it was a real partnership approach. I don't know what was happening this season, but unfortunately the weather was just really, every Thursday morning it seemed to rain or be really cold. And it did put people off, and we had COVID. And then 3 of the people that had indicated that they'd be very keen to come ended up having medical conditions which prevented them from being in the water. So the So it wasn't really such a success, but everything was against us, I think. However, those that came along loved it, and the tutor was really fantastic. And I think we have to look at the partnerships that have been made along the way as well, have been very strong. We also had 2 pool parties, but again, they were cancelled, one because of COVID and one because of the weather. But we did reschedule those. One was rescheduled with the Sea Scouts, and they did their water safety swim rather than having a party. And then the other one, the youth group, came in and had a little bit of a session. The numbers were low for the various reasons, but we did get there in the end. We were able to provide something. So Ben, I'll leave you to do the pay to play review.
So as Tricia mentioned, we're always looking at initiatives to try and increase participation for the community at Norman Kirk. So one of the things we looked at, I'm not sure if you're aware, at the rec centre, they have pay to play in place, which helps provide casual access when staff aren't on site. So we thought we'd look at that for the pool itself. So we had Vaughan Uttridge from Serious Fund do a feasibility study for us just to see if it was an option. The way that the memberships work is you need to do a health and safety induction prior to becoming a card holder. So there's to ensure that obviously the risks are managed for our customers when using the facility. So I suppose the outcome for the pay to play review was it wouldn't be suitable for Norman Kirk, and the main reason for that would be because the customers would be required to have health and safety induction. It doesn't really cater for that kind of casual user with pay to play, whereas it's a really hot day, they think, oh, we want to go and use the pool today. They would still have to have done a health and safety induction prior to doing that. So we worked out that won't be a suitable option for the pool, but obviously always still looking at initiatives that we can put in place to help with that. I think Trish has probably already touched on it. We do have lifeguards there from the start of November to the start of February. So we have availability for casual use in those periods of time where we have lifeguards at the facility, and also we have the ability for casuals to use the facility in February and March when accompanying a member of the pool as well. So yeah, should I go in conclusion or do you want me to?
No, you can go for conclusion.
Perfect. So unfortunately the key system, the key system that we currently have in place, the membership system, will continue with, which has been really successful. We'll continue our partnerships with Project Littleton to look at, again, ways we can work with the community and provide those casual passes or memberships. Unfortunately the pay to play recommendation we won't pursue with, but always looking at activities and ways to activate the space. So open to any ideas there. And then also looking at investigating funding options for potential programs. Right.
I've just got, sorry, one more thing I wanted to add that I didn't make it get into the presentation there. But with the opening of Te Pou Toi Toi Linwood Pool, we've also slightly changed our structure as well, in that before, when we were operating the pool, we would only have staff come in for fixed term to operate it, which is quite difficult, that you sort of have to start from scratch again every year. But now we're sort of trying to have a partnership going with Te Pou Toi Toi and the team there, and we've created a new position called Senior Aquatic Supervisor, which is a leadership position there, but also during the summer comes here and operates the pool. So we have one person who's the leader of the pool, and the idea is that it will be the same. There'll be some continuity there with the staff, so that they can really sort of build on those relationships and build on the learnings from each and every year. So that's just one change that we've made.
Yeah.
And also the synergies that are happening, like one of the lifeguards is now one of the youth leaders for the youth group here. So making those connections as well has been really beneficial. Yeah.
So Tricia, you touched on before, sorry Nigel, I did see you had the hand up. You touched on before about the seniors activation.
Yeah.
Is that looking at going ahead again this year?
Yeah, I'd like to definitely put a bit more promotion into it this year. And
if we can do this kind of stuff to start the conversation earlier on rather than trying to be reactive later on in the season. But hey, have these ideas come up earlier on, so that's stuff that people look forward to.
Yeah,
especially senior citizens that are trying to, diaries and calendars and that kind of stuff. So I'm happy to support that. So Nigel, then Andrew. Nigel?
Yeah, I don't like seeing people excluded anyway. This idea of the casual needed to be inducted. You can get systems, you know, they have them in business systems where you can go in in the reception areas where they don't have a receptionist, you can go and ask the certain questions, tick the boxes, and the ticket prints it out, and you're inducted to go on the site.
Yeah.
Can not something like that not be considered?
Probably Ryan, you want to talk to the what's involved in the induction?
Yeah, so with the induction, obviously there's just the safety element of the swimming pool is a bit different than going on some construction sites or whatever, but at the moment we do our inductions in person, so that part's really important to us so that we can make sure that they understand what's going on, run them through the rules and show them around, show them where the first aid equipment is, where the AED is, and make sure that and obviously they have to sign off that they've done the induction as well. So for us, it's really important that we're able to do that in person, so that we can, I guess, make sure that they're understanding what the safety elements are.
Yeah,
I struggle with that a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, so it is very high risk area, obviously being a pool.
What's happened now? They're taking all the pools out of schools at high risk. No one knows how to swim, and they'll go and drown in a river.
Yeah,
you know, it's just something I feel fairly strongly about, but that's yeah. I don't know how we get around that. But.
Thank you, Andrew, and then Ruben.
Thank you. Thanks for the updates. This is great for us to getting this detailed information. The distribution of the casual swim passes to those who would benefit from them, I think is a great initiative. Getting the figures on distribution is one thing. Do we know what the usage of those was? Like how many of the ones that were distributed actually came back to us and resulted in people using the pool?
I think all the casual swim passes were definitely used by those groups.
Right.
I know the memberships that were the previous year, 5 of the members, I think the pool was used over 200 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the placement, obviously, they're going to the right place and their value.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
good.
I think the casual swim passes, everybody felt had more of a reach to more people, but both were good. It was just this time, it was with the COVID, there just wasn't the funds to have those 8 memberships.
And that's fair enough. No, I get that. I mean, you know, on the face of it, if there is that need in the community, spreading it more broadly possibly is more equitable.
Yeah.
All right. And my second question, I'm really pleased to hear that the key system is proposed to continue. I'm happy to keep supporting
I know.
since it was first brought in. And, you know, I know the value of it and the benefits of the community, how much people love it. With a bit more free time on my hands after the beginning of October, I'm hoping to be a permanent sense. But just confirming that the intention would be to start that again from mid-November and run it through to the end of March. So run it the way that it has run in these previous years.
Correct.
Yeah. Excellent. Good. Thank you.
Okay, Ruben, you've got a couple of questions for me.
I do. One thing that I couldn't see, but it's quite possibly in there. What is the the casual costs? There's a link for casual pool fees, but it won't take me to it for some products for me. But do we know roughly what the cost is for a casual user?
For an adult, it's $6.20, I think it is now, and a child's about half that.
Cool. Yeah. So it's pretty reasonable. There was in that report too. There was a breakdown of all the other pools in the area, or all the other facilities, which was good to see. But I guess the other thing that I'm aware of is that Norman Kirk's like the only one that, if you live in Middleton, that you could walk to. So all those other ones either through tunnels or via boat or just 10 k's round to Governor's Bay. So as far as being local, it's super local. The other thing, the other comment from going there is, I think it's amazingly well looked after. So I think the maintenance, the look of the pool, it's really, really good. I think we should all be aware of that.
Happy to pass that through.
And then the other thought was seeing some of the activities that you've persevered with despite challenges of weather and COVID and things. If those things continue in this year, like the groundwork feels like it's well and truly underway and has been done, which is awesome. I just wondered about things like making the pool free the day that it opens, so that you try and get as many people in there as possible on the day that it opens from around Littleton. Then that might get people into the habit of going along to it. So some kind of event like that, which obviously has potentially a cost because you're letting people in for nothing, but probably would pay dividends because you get people into the habit of using your local pool. And then once you install the hot water pools up in those upper grass areas that have got salt water in them, it won't just be
You better go to
Andrew
the
wanting
Yakara
it,
one.
it'll be everybody in Littleton. Hot water in Littleton is very popular even in summer. So just that would be great to see the plans for that next year.
Food for thought, is that river food?
Yeah, and let's not cut down any trees to do it.
Just I'm following up from what Ruben was saying. I didn't quite see there have fees being set for going forward for this swimming season, or is that still to be done? And can last season's I guess learnings that there is greater care, therefore keeping that price that little bit lower being taken into consideration, because obviously people that are key holders, whatever, they do keep the maintenance and they do take care of the pool. So have fees been set? If not, can we keep into consideration what we went from last year and having those fees a little bit lower in consideration of keeping the place tidy and clean?
It'll remain at $140 for the membership and half of that for the 2 months.
So the membership fees remain the same. The casual fees usually are reviewed. So I think with the annual plan sign off, they may have been finalised the last week or two.
Is they still incorporated with the community services card, or that kind of thing? There is still access for lower fees for
That's right. Yeah.
I do feel that this is a good news story for the board and for the area to start promoting it now, so that we can, as Ruben said, plant as many seeds as possible, because the greater use in the community is benefit for everybody. So no, thank you, team. We have got a small resolution to take everything that you've given us today on board and more information supplied. So we appreciate your time and Trish's hard work and activating the community and both involved.
Good work.
Yes, that's fantastic. So I'm happy to approve the notes, receive the notes, and Sylvia second, and Andrew Sylvia second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you, team. We appreciate you coming by and giving us the breakdown of what's been happening. Fantastic. Right. Philippa. Good morning. It feels like it's been a while since I've seen you too. Each of the screen is quite hard.
Yes, it's lovely to see you all in person. Got 2 applications for discretionary response. This is the last opportunity for allocating these this year, because we're almost at the end of our financial year. And both have a recommendation of $1,000.
Okay. Anyone have a question for Philippa regarding this?
I've got a comment and a question. The first comment is because I remember when the organisers of the festival came through, which seems like not very long ago at all. So it's great to see it come up so quickly because it was a very short notice event.
Yes.
So that's awesome. And then the next question is, I see we're giving, where there was just over 2,000 requested, or sorry, where 2,000 was requested, we're offering 1,000 on the first, and where 1,500 was requested, we're offering 1,000. Is that going to match the, just given that the event's happening in 2 weeks or so? Do you think that that's that they've got an expectation of not receiving more than that?
Yes, I've talked with the group and provided a ballpark figure for that, and they said that a contribution towards would be gratefully received, and they realised that it was the lead-in time has been short, and they so sort of securing funding towards it hasn't had the usual lead-in time, but they are hoping that the festival is going to be an annual event. So I've suggested some opportunities for the future that might be appropriate for them.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Philippa? No, otherwise I have got the resolution here. So Ruben and Andrew, before I get off the blocks. So Ruben's happy to move, Andrew's happy to second. All those in favour?
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Philippa. Okay, and thank you for waiting the morning, Andrew. Come along. Right, so we're on to item
Nice to meet in person again.
10.
And I'm joined with Gemma Dione, Senior Transportation Engineer in Traffic Operations, and Gemma is responsible for the school safety program. And the report we're bringing to you today is the Littleton Pedestrian Improvement Project, which actually has its origins in from many years ago in the school travel plan we did with Littleton School. So it has taken quite a while to work its way through the process and the priorities. I guess what's also happened in the meantime is over the last few years we've had a number of requests that have come through the board. I think I've had a briefing and a memo back to you about ways which we could improve the situation for pedestrians in Littleton. And also what's happened since, I guess, is we've now got a far clearer signal on the return of the cruise ships and the passengers to Littleton. You'll note I did a survey of pedestrian movements at these crossings, including one on a market day, and I was actually really surprised how many movements there were. These figures sort of stack up against things we might see in arguably more substantial commercial areas and possibly parts of Central City. I mean, having numbers of 100 or 172 in an hour, and I think we had 200 an hour on one of the movements is quite significant. So what this proposal does, not just for the kids and also for the community, is significantly improves the visibility of pedestrians and also of motorists, so that intervisibility. It significantly reduces the crossing distance that pedestrians have, and also supports lower operating speeds, including for turning vehicles, which is a concern. It coincides pretty well with the forthcoming 40k speed limit, and also with the forthcoming plans for under the new city and speed limits rule. Littleton School, the school speed zone, we will look to change from 40 to 30 k's an hour. So that's just some of that background context. Probably of note is the comments around in the report and the consultation around concerns about tracking movements of the heavy vehicles, and that's something we did go back and do quite a lot of work on, and including a survey of those movements. And Gemma's here today to discuss those further. I think what was surprising is that although there is a lot of heavy vehicle movements, what was surprising was that there's probably a perception that there's more than there actually is. And also what was surprising was given the volumes on the road with the other vehicles, the chances of conflict between the vehicles was relatively low. I certainly had in my mind that the conflict was probably going to be a bit higher, but it was one of those ones when we studied it came a little different. But Gemma will be able to.
Yeah, so we ran scenarios in our auto tracking software, which is a package that we use at council. And we did 4 scenarios: semi-trailers, B-trains, truck and trailer units, and 11.5 trucks, which is probably the more standard one. And at the slower speeds, we didn't see much difference between what they're doing now and what they would do with the additional build out. And I think, as Andrew said, you get the additional benefits for pedestrians with the build out. Traffic volumes at this intersection aren't overly high. The right turning truck movements are generally outside of the peak times when the kids would be travelling to school. And in 1 hour in the afternoon, that was around 3 HGVs. The breakdown is more towards the 11.5 trucks rather than the semi-trailers and B-trains. We do know that they're there, but as Andrew said, with the traffic calming features, we're hoping that they do those movements slower and with care, more care than they're currently doing.
One feature is the visibility is actually of a vehicle approaching another vehicle at an intersection. The turn is actually pretty good. What's not good is the visibility as a pedestrian. One thing that was surprising though is worth noting is that this is very rare that was actually a net gain of parking spaces.
Yes.
It's being advertised as one in the report. It's possibly two, but I'll reserve that comment until we actually see it on the ground. But it looks like it's certainly one gain of one space, and that is because with the build outs you need less no stopping lines.
And it's Oxford Street, isn't it, by the school
Yeah,
and.
yeah. So we actually put some additional parking spaces, I think 2 on the school side outside Lilton Arts Factory, which will help that pick up drop off. The reduction is the one immediately above the Lilton Information Centre. The other thing worth noting too, in the report, there was some concern from the Lilton Information Centre about replacing the existing passenger service vehicles parking restriction, which operates largely unrestricted between October and April, I think it is, and then P60 outside those times. So fairly blunt sort of restriction really, and talking with some of the people at the Information Centre, there has been problems with others parking there. So the original proposal in the consultation was to replace that with a P5 at any time. There was some concern from the chair of the trust that runs the Information Centre, so I agreed to take that out and bring it back at a later date. What's happened since is that we've got far more information regarding cruise ship bus movements, and we think there's sufficient room for a Littleton Loop Township shuttle service to stop outside. P5 certainly works better where you've got short stay pickup drop off needs for rest of London Street, go to the toilet and things like that. And also with removing, if we were to remove it, and I have drafted a resolution should you wish to bring that forward, is actually discourages the potential for touting. So at the moment, anyone with a passenger service licence in a vehicle like that could actually stop outside the Information Centre, largely unrestricted in trade, and that's one thing we do want to avoid. We have got some options with shrouds that we can put over parking spaces, and we may look to that if we need additional capacity. But so that was the rationale for wanting to change that anyway. And I think next month you'll be having a report regarding the additional bus space on Norwich Quay, which was also a hangover from the old cruise ship days.
So do we have any questions for Andrew? Yes, Ruben.
I almost made a submission for this, but thought better of it. But a couple of questions. One is, it doesn't affect, am I right in thinking that it doesn't have any effect on there's some like residential parking permits on Oxford Street opposite the school, doesn't interfere with those at all, right?
No, they're the ones on the western side between Winchester and London.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Cool.
Yep.
The other one was that in the submissions, there was at least one that talked about the potential to lower the speed limit on London. Well, there's a few that talked about getting rid of cars altogether on London Street.
Yes.
Tidy, but then there was
That could be interesting.
it would be, it's a polite word for it, but then and making it one way. But there was also the suggestion of reducing the speed limit to 30.
Yeah.
Is there any thoughts on that?
Yes. Yes, there are. I think in the report I commented that we'd like to see, or I should have commented in the report, we'd like to see what the 40 does.
Yeah.
London Street typically has very low operating speeds anyway. It's constrained. The amount of vehicles that are backing in and out naturally pull those operating speeds down. If we were to look at 30, it would be ideally done in conjunction with the rejigging of the school speed zone.
Yeah, so as part of the setting of speed limits rule 2022, which came into effect in May, we now have the ability to put in permanent 30-kilometre zones outside schools, but to look just beyond the school gate as well. So London Street would be a route where children walk to school, and so we could look to permanently make that 30 kilometres an hour also. We will come back to you in August with the interim speed management plan for Open Park in Christchurch, and then we can loop it in with those discussions then.
The only, I've just briefly talked to Jim before, the only hesitation I've got with London Street is I guess we already have those low operating speeds, but also how we would signpost it in a meaningful way. It's quite a unusual layout, and there's quite a lot of signage already, so that's something we would have to work through. And also with those zebra crossings there too. But it's certainly not impossible, and something that we're actively considering.
On the, sorry,
No, no,
I've got a couple more here. There's two other things. Tactile pavers, which I know have been an issue in Akaroa before, with local residents. Given those existing build outs in the paving that's there in that middle section of London Street, do you think it's essential that you have tactile pavers in the footpath? Or do you think that you could just go special character, don't need the Lego land look, we could do without them?
Well, all the technical guidance, the best practice guidance is to install them. Akaroa was a very difficult situation, and will be revisited as well.
Still been worked on in some cases.
Yes. My advice would be that in a situation even like Littleton, is that the benefits to them would outweigh some of the more subjective viewpoints that some may have on tactile pavers. They're just a basic standard feature.
I think the issue in Akaroa was only a little bit around tactile pavers.
Yeah.
The other bit was the direction the access is going in the build out itself.
Because those footpath sections on the build outs in the centre of London Street have got like compass.
Yes.
And like it's quite nicely done. I just think adding anything like tactile pavers or anything into that is gonna it's kind of gonna ruin it a little.
But from what I understand, that is a different surface treatment in those build outs anyway. So does that not counteract? I know it's not the bright yellow tactile things. I'm just leaning on what you're saying, Ruben, is the fact that there's already a change in underfoot texture in those build outs anyway. Does that come into what Ruben's saying?
We can look at it through detailed design, but in terms of RTS 14 and our requirements for providing for people that are visually or low impaired, they are familiar with directionals, they're familiar with warning, with the warning tactiles. And I think we don't want to inhibit someone's access to the space by not allowing for them at a safe crossing point. Regarding colours, as long as there's a variation between the base surface and the tactile, then that becomes a consideration we can look at, but to dismiss them altogether, I think that would be outside of what we can actually do.
It's outside council policy, I understand too. So there is a council policy on the provision of these. I think from memory, this project will actually replace some of the very aging plastic ones that were installed, which in my opinion don't look particularly nice, and the more robust
pavers.
Well, yeah, pavers, concrete pavers, really, and the coloured concrete pavers would be far better.
Ruben, so
I've got one last question. Sorry. So the final question is on the concept of a zebra crossing in that main stretch of London Street, and this has come from, I've had a couple of local kids contact me and say that they wanted a crossing there, but also that they didn't want a zebra crossing. They wanted to be able to like design something or create something that was, and I understand there's regulations around what you can paint on the road that doesn't make people stop and look, because you just want them to get across in front of traffic. But that there could be something that's a little more imaginative or exciting than just white lines painted on the road. And that's probably something for detailed design, right?
It's actually something different altogether. A zebra crossing is an approved traffic control device, and with that comes restrictions on what you can and how it looks. Under the traffic control devices rule changes last year, an exception was made where you could look to incorporate street art. So art on the roadway that isn't a traffic control device. There are certain recommendations that have to be met. So that has to be a slow speed zone. It has to be under 30 kilometres an hour operating speeds. And it isn't something that council is dismissive of. It's in the rule, it's permitted as long as we meet those requirements. it would just be a separate project to what we're trying to do here. But it's never off the cards, especially if we got Linden Street to 30 kilometres an hour and that it looked and felt and operated at less than 30. Then yes, it would be something that's good you could do with the community. We have to make sure that there's like a process that we go through for the buy-in, the build of it, but also the maintenance of it. If we don't have that, sometimes they can look very shady very quickly. And you wouldn't want to be left with a bit of a mess over time.
I think one other comment, Ruben, would be that what's proposed provides priority to pedestrians versus if there wasn't a zebra pedestrian crossing and it was an enhancement of effectively what's there now, which is a courtesy crossing, it doesn't provide that priority. I was surprised how many people were made positive comments about their mid-block one.
Yes,
I wasn't expecting that as much because the existing facility is functional. So this is one of those cases which is an improvement. And the board members will remember a few years ago when I measured the delay that some of the elderly were having crossing, because that was the other concern, is how long that was taking for them to cross. On pension day, I think it was. I got out there and did some surveys. So this will actually give them priority.
That came into effect on Norwich King too, if I recall.
Yes,
it
did.
was effect of Norwich King.
It's a few years ago now, isn't it? Sorry, that worked, but
the thing is, it still made the bigger picture. It still came into mindset. No.
So, sorry, just to be crystal clear on that zebra crossing. So, given the timing of this project, could that be realised as something that was, rather than getting a zebra crossing painted there and then painting it out and creating something different, could we create something different from the beginning?
Not at this stage. As Andrew said, they offer two different things. The painting still wouldn't afford priority to the elderly or children crossing the road. It's just a painting on the street that looks to improve amenity, and in some cases it does have a slowing effect that I think the latest studies have shown, but it still wouldn't afford priority for children or elderly using the space.
Or anyone.
Or anyone, yes.
Ruben, is it you for the state?
That is all my questions.
Okay, I noticed that Howard has got his hand up. He's probably looking at his sheets at the moment. So Howard, you got a question for the team?
Yeah, if I could just have I gone blank? Have I? Okay. If you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Regarding London Street zebra crossing, obviously still, we might as well carry on talking about this. Have you considered, you obviously have, I assume, and I've just missed wherever it is in the report or discussions, but joining, rather than putting a pedestrian crossing there, putting a permanent adjoining of the build outs and making it a blocked area, making it a dead end streets from both ends, keeping the car parking, and that way you stop through traffic and you solve your speed problems and people crossing the road.
On the street.
Well, they just have angle. You'd still have the same amount of angle parking. You would have to change the angle of the other side, but it'd only be accessed by a dead end road. So people can
Andrew
still drive
Kingsley
past.
has got a response to that, Howard. So Andrew.
Okay. Obviously, I caused a great amount of amusement.
A key feature of London Street as a functioning commercial area is to be able to travel through it for vehicles, and the through vehicle movements on the whole don't cause significant issues. We would likely cause significant frustration for local residents in blocking that to vehicles in the middle. Also, you double the amount of vehicle movements in a cul-de-sac. So instead of one vehicle parking and driving through, a vehicle would drive in, park, have to turn around, then come back out the other way. And that's one of the challenges with cul-de-sacs.
Okay, yeah. No, it sounds fair enough. You obviously considered it. I just thought, oh yeah, but, solve problem, but obviously not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Howard. Any further questions on this report? Otherwise, we have got recommendations here.
Madam Chair, I have the additional recommendation that staff has provided.
Andrew, do you want to talk to that?
Yes, it was the the resolution which I've drafted, should the board wish to progress it, it relates to that original proposal for the P5 outside the Littleton Information Centre, which was consulted on. There was concerns raised about how it would operate with the cruise ship traffic. It was withdrawn from the report in the interest of progressing the report. In between this happening, there's been information from both Christchurch NZ, Cruise NZ. I've also spoken to the Deputy Mayor in relation to the cruise ship traffic about this, and the intention would be we would, if it wasn't incorporated within this report, we would bring it back as a separate report at a later date. So that's the situation.
Thank you for the information. So obviously there is other factors in why this has come back to us. Is there anything else we need to take into consideration? So obviously at one point, and Andrew Tuna might be able to enlighten us with this, that the people of the information system weren't happy with it, how it's sat, but knowing that further information, and I mean, I'm fully aware that we're expecting busyness of some description. So having that parked out for 60 minutes, whatever that may be, would hamper the information system. Andrew, what's your feedback?
Yeah,
I'm
fully supportive of this. The conversation that Andrew had,
yes,
suggests that this is the right thing to do. Bearing in mind, I mean, I've been in contact with our staff that are working in Cruise, Christchurch NZ staff that are working on Cruise, and the information centre. I've been at the last couple of meetings on the board, obviously, and the information centre would be comfortable with this. I mean, Andrew's taken the time and trouble to speak to people at the information centre that were here on the ground the last time with the cruise and that know the way this works, the unintended outcomes we're trying to avoid. I'm really supportive of the approach, and I think if we can avoid staff having to write another report to come back to us again, if we can do it today, Andrew, that's what you're asking us to do, isn't it?
Yes, because on non-cruise ship days, as at the moment, legally no one can park there unless they're a cruise ship, passenger service vehicle.
Yeah.
So we've got many non-cruise ship days, and that's a bit of the anomaly, is that quite rightly other people want to take the opportunity to park there. We also had the advantage this time around of the ability to use a shroud under the traffic and parking bylaw to shroud the sign to further reinforce it with cruise ship shuttles only if it becomes a problem.
That's good, and I like the bit about giving us some way of managing touting as well. I think that's significant. So I'm happy to be the mover of this with that clause included, noting, and I mean just acknowledging, actually noting, but acknowledging that I am on board of Christchurch NZ and the board of the information centre. So I've got some interest in this and some knowledge of it, but I don't believe that that makes me conflict tonight.
No, and like I say, it's always good to have that other input. Now that just looking at the diagram we've got here, the parking delineated in front of the information centre, does that go right to the back of the edge of the build out? I'm just sort of looking at that we get. Would you make it or
the driveway, unfortunately?
Is there a car park in there? Is it built?
There's a vehicle crossing. But what from memory it is, but what it will do is allow the vehicles that are accessing it
pulling into the
a better run, and that's my understanding of what's on site there.
Okay. No,
it doesn't show up very well.
We've got a car that's parked there, and that's when the build out's going to sit right onto that car. So no, I thank you for that clarification.
And should there be any issues with how it operates, because a lot of this is there's still an element of the unknown with this. We'll act quickly and bring another.
And the other thing is the other side of the road. That's obviously still flexible with different parking.
There's no proposals to change that at this stage.
But that could be looked at quite quickly. Should we notice that issue coming up?
Yes.
People in and out of the information centre don't want to go.
Now that we're in agreement about not permitting touting on the road, what will be interesting is have we got enough space for tours that are pre-booked and arranged to pick people up, whether they do it whether on the ship or online or through the information centre. I know the information centre's got limited ability to do that, but that is the unknown. We think we're going to be okay with what we've got, but
if we start having significant demand there, we may have to put something in a temporary fashion, but I don't think it's a permanent change myself.
And it could be a TTMP as required over the summer this year.
Yeah.
If we see a need for one, that then, you know, before we get into the, what will it be, 2023-24 summer, we put some permanent restrictions in place that are more suited. There is going to be an element of suck and see with this upcoming first season. And I mean, that's across a number of functions. This is just one of the issues.
The other question I had that I may have skimmed over, and I apologise, lead time for this. So is this going to be in this, all these improvements are going to be done before obviously September? What's the lead time? Are we looking at this now that's not going to go into Christmas, or is it?
We're hoping for an October build. We're just waiting for the lights for the pedestrian crossings. So as part of the zebra crossings, we have to upgrade the lighting so that they're safe. And just with COVID, there's just a longer lead time on those lights currently, but our aim is to get it in by October.
Oh, in by October, okay. Thank you.
And one more question. I'm just mindful of the way that the criticism of the build out in Akaroa landed from the local commentary point of view and a wider political point of view. And I'm also aware of political commentary at the moment on, for example, the Antigua Street cycle lane, where people are saying we can just paint a line on the ground, I don't doubt that this could be a target for similar political comments about, you know, waste of money, no benefit, How are we communicating this? That the board's making this decision today and the benefits and the safety that it brings, so that we don't end up this becoming a political football that you know, is far wider than the actual considerations. Is there, for example, going to be a newsline article or some kind of media release? Or I just think we can probably avoid a load of unnecessary negativity, particularly given that we're, you know, 12 odd weeks out from an election, with some pretty clear communications, not just about the fact that we're doing it, but about the actual benefits that it's going to bring, particularly in the context of increased traffic movements because of crews and you know, that sort of thing.
Yes, we could speak with the media team about newsline article, and there may be options through the board newsletter.
But really highlighting the safety benefits.
And arguably the biggest benefits to this is around improvements to accessibility.
Yes.
So although there's a, you know, at the moment there's a residual risk to pedestrian movements, it shouldn't be discounted the benefits to accessibility from actually making people feel it's easier to cross than what it is now.
The other thing is regarding the school access as well.
Yes.
Kids that are walking to school that are of a younger age, having those safe points to cross.
So I think if we're presenting it in that way, so that it's about children and people with particular accessibility requirements, it makes it very difficult for anybody to argue. What I don't want is anybody saying this is just a complete waste of money or beautifying the little town centre.
Gold plating little.
Yeah, I can hear it now.
It's also just worth noting, I mean, any intersection which is running at these sort of figures for an hour, I mean, 200 pedestrian movements from 220 to 320 on a school day, and they weren't all school children, is significant. And you know, 215 on one morning when the market was on, 10:14 to 11:14, and that was one of the crossings was one of them closed, of course.
Yeah.
We're dealing with significant numbers here, so it's not a
insignificant.
no.
And the nature of the vehicles, you know, there's a lot of heavy traffic. And, you know, this is a Banks Peninsula town centre at the end of the day. This isn't just a regular suburban centre.
No, appreciate it. So Andrew has moved. Ruben's having the second, you can end fast today, Ruben. So Andrew has moved, Ruben the second, if there's no further discussion.
I think it's great that he doesn't have to write another report, because he can do one on ours now. Thank you.
It's still coming back next month. It's not as if we don't see it very often.
No.
No, and so with that extra resolution in there, it has been moved by Andrew, seconded by Ruben. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. So no, thank you both.
Thank you.
Andrew, before you leave, can I come in here a few seconds of your time?
Yes, I think that's okay.
Because we
Madam
are
Chair.
going into elected members exchange. I had changed my screen. 2 questions regarding NZTA that you may be able to enlighten us on.
Yep.
Recently, we've heard that cost share may be still going ahead with the drain in Little River. Do you know about that? You obviously
No.
don't. Okay.
No,
I had heard something that come through regarding the cost share. But it's okay. Thank you,
Right.
Calvin.
Great. I've been involved until probably, I haven't heard anything for the last few months, to be fair, but I've been linking the people up still. So that's great to hear that.
Okay, I heard something come through and I wasn't sure.
Because that will also allow us to improve the parking situation.
Absolutely.
And reduce the need for larger towing vehicles to turn in and out of the parking area.
Especially coming into busy season.
Which just cuts down the amount of turning movements across where people walk through. So that's great.
Yeah.
The other one, I'm not sure if you can answer, is once again associated with NZTA, is regarding shared path between Little River and Kuha. That's obviously ongoing discussion with NZTA, but I heard they are happy to continue the conversation regarding that shared path.
The last I heard of it was when I met them on site, and I walked over the site with them and showed them the benefits to it and where it could possibly connect through if they were considering it through to the school. I also took them around Western Valley Road, Church Road, and around by Council Hill Road and showed them all the other connections. But I haven't heard any more.
The fact that the fact that to me it's a one that we're having an ongoing conversation is great.
I understand there's further investigations they're undertaking into it, but I've shown them on the ground
issues and other aspects.
Yes, there's also some interesting property boundaries.
Yes.
Yes, along that road corridor.
We appreciate you answer. Andrew's got a question.
I do, and it's about road closures in Littleton. So signs for road closures never happen. Roads that are closed when there's no need for them to be closed. And Littleton residents taking a whose town is this anyway approach to roads closed when they don't need to be closed and just removing the road closed signs and driving through anyway. So beginning of June, there were road closed signs for Ross Parade, Shackleton Terrace, Selwyn Road and Hawkins Road down to the junction with the bridle path. And everybody was getting very concerned about how what access was going to look like with all of those roads supposedly simultaneously closed at the same time. And none of the road closures actually happened. The signs went up. The period of the road closure came and went. The road was never closed, and the warning signs that the road would be closed on those dates all got taken down again, and that was the end. So they created a lot of anxiety about access for no reason whatsoever. At the current time, we've got a road closure on Hawkins Road from kind of the bottom to the junction of the Tysonhurst. And there are people working there digging sizable holes in a part of the road. It's all to do with stormwater drain project. But then, they knock off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and one half of the road remains usable but remains closed. So all that's happening is the residents are removing the road closed signs and codes, driving through anyway, which they are physically able to do. It actually creates a relatively dangerous situation at the junction of Hawkehurst and Selwyn, because anybody driving along Selwyn and observing the road closed signs wouldn't expect anybody coming up Hawkehurst when traffic is coming up Hawkehurst, because the road is technically closed but practically open.
I can honestly say I don't know anything about both those jobs, and I will speak to the temporary traffic management team about their situation, because
the first ones are of greater concern, where there were all these warning signs went up on all these streets at the same time, which would have actually been impractical to implement unless you were deliberately intending stopping people getting to their own homes. But then all the anxiety that caused, all the questions, all the phone calls, not one road closure took place. So I don't know whether it was a mistake, whether it was meant to be Selwyn Street in Christchurch and they did Selwyn Road in Littleton instead or something. The Hawkehurst one is just Littleton people doing what Littleton people do and demonstrating that this is our town, not anybody else's town. But it's actually meaning there's a reasonably dangerous situation. The right thing to do would be to have if it could be done, would be to have the temporary road closure during the day while the work's going on, and then open the road in the evenings at the weekend and then close it while the work's going on.
Especially if it's physically safe to do so.
Well, it's physically possible to do so. The safety issue is at the junction of Hawkehurst and Selwyn, where because there's a road closed sign, anybody driving along Selwyn, the very few people that would drive along Selwyn to come up to Upper Hawkehurst, bearing in mind there's only like 10 houses or something like that, wouldn't expect anybody coming up Hawkehurst Road. Because it's a hill, people tend to drive up there at reasonable speed. And yeah, that junction is where the potential danger
So
is.
is that linking into the traffic management team and making sure that things are practical on the ground? Because like you say, closing a road that doesn't need to be closed, that could perhaps be one way while people aren't on site, may be more effective and especially constrained areas like Littleton than what might be.
And it doesn't count that the detour is, you know, all the way up here under what I call suburb to suburb, which is like the long,
Up
very
around the
long
back,
up here. You know,
yeah,
it's a convolution. It's like climbing a tree to get home if you don't just break the room on Hawkins.
I was going to make a comment that the alternatives are not that easily accessible. But what about if I ask the temporary traffic management team to reply back through Liz or Penelope, and then you can distribute that to the board?
Creasy Terrace has exactly the same issue at the
Creasy?
moment too.
Right.
Because I drove along.
Thank you, Ed. We appreciate your extra few minutes to allow us our questions, and
That's all right.
you would have got the questions come through anyway. We're just
It's what happens when you apply the rules to Littleton as if it's a normal place, when clearly it's not.
Apex Peninsula. Some of these rural roads aren't the same. So no, we appreciate your time, Andrew.
All right, that's good. Thank you.
So no, thank you for, no, thank you.
Our one's coming.
We'll save our team sending you emails that would have been the same questions.
And I'll provide an update to the various board actions shortly. I think there's some on pedestrians, cruise ships. So we've got a lot more information last week actually. So
Brilliant.
I'll reply back to those board actions, and all the board members will be updated at the same
Thank
time.
you.
But looking forward to that happening again.
We'll no doubt see you next month.
Yes, I'll be there to for another report.
Lots of other ones on.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Okay, and so on that note, we've finished item 10 on to members exchange. So I apologise, staff. I did sneak that in there. But make hay with sunshine sometimes. Right, so Andrew, have you got some things to share from members exchange
So
today?
temporary traffic management is a little I've done.
Yep.
The only other thing to talk about, and I'm sure Nigel will talk about this as well, is the particularly excellent event early on Friday morning, unveiling the Peninsula in Aquarella, and the rather excellent hosting that we benefited from at all of the events as well. It was a pleasure to attend. It was great to see other council colleagues there. Yanni Johansson and Galloway and Sarah Templeton, Mike Davidson and Phil Major, and the mayor and I. So there was a decent showing from council.
So Ruben.
Yeah, my thanks were, I was lucky enough to take part in what was called Project Matariki, but became Tihei Matariki at Living Springs, which is an event that we had supported as a community board. So that was led by Maui Stewart from Rapaki, and he was supported by Ihaya from Koko Rarata and John McLister from Littleton. And it was an incredible, such a successful event, so well run, so well managed, and went across 3 nights. I was there for the Friday night, and there were lots of different people from around different parts of the peninsula, but also from outside of the peninsula in Christchurch. And like I can see they'll be asking for more money next year. It's just going to keep growing, which is excellent. Yeah, really, really good. And I think Project Littleton did a lot of work to ensure that could run and happen in supporting Maui, but also Maui just had a really clear picture and pushed to make it happen, which is great. One of the conversations I had there was around Helen, the carbon coach, who was also there, who we've met from Project Littleton, is wanting to establish it won't be contentious, but it can be in other parts of Christchurch, a plant to compost the compost matter that's generated by the farmers market on the weekends. And the intention is to try and keep that in port so that it's actually done locally with the waste we generate locally. And she's found a site that could be good, but it's just around what process she needs to follow to have the conversations with the necessary people in the council. And the site is Wilson's Road in Littleton, so not the one in town, up above Creasy Terrace. And there's like a vacant council space there. So So I was just wondering what the process is as far as whether there's someone we connect to with to look at that, or whether we can ask the question and have that come back to the board as a formal question or action, what the best way to investigate that would be.
We could ask staff if they could provide some information about what that might look like.
Yeah. I mean, it would be relatively small scale, but just it's important that it sits on ground, not on a sealed space. You know, there used to be a tank or something up, like a water tank or something up there. It's the most picturesque compost plant in the world, as you can imagine.
There's probably more people tending to it and
Yeah.
taking care of it.
Yeah,
So
and
look to-
it won't generate smell. And then the other one was I had contact from a resident who has had ongoing issues with their property neighbouring a reserve that is under council management and plant matter growing through old man's behead, not just weeds and plants. And that they've escalated this over previous time through to CE level at council and have had correspondence back. But more recently, they've had unsatisfactory interactions with staff around that they found threatening and intimidating. So they contacted me to say, what could I do about that? And I said, I will raise it here. And I'm not sure what we can do by way of, I mean, probably this person is best to follow it back up with the CE and say, if they've started a conversation, they've got a conversation to that level, possibly they should continue at that level. Maybe I just need to help them do that.
See if you could help them do that, and if that doesn't seem an easy option. Then
and then the only other one was.
So I was just going to say they could also take it up with their can, because it's their can who are responsible for noxious weeds that actually work.
Right.
The neighbours noxious weeds. Neighbour is the council.
Yeah.
Weekends coming.
Yeah. Council to council conversation. Surely the easier thing is just to trim the plants. Then, and then the final one was I went down to the Albion Square playground in the weekend, not for me, for some young visitors, and it just is pretty, and it's in a bit of a state of disrepair. So the water feature has had all of its water tap elements removed. Looks like officially like they're just gone, so that doesn't work anymore. And the mosaic seats got quite a few bits missing from it and things taped up, and it all just looks a little bit tragic. So I don't know whether we can.
Yeah.
Just immediately this little playground here.
And water feature we've raised a number of times before.
Yeah.
And it never really would happen for the beginning, but even it's meant to be something.
Yeah. It just kind of has a feeling of no one having gone and done anything to it for a while. Great to see a playground as amazing as Little Brothers.
No, so
That's me.
thank you, Ruben. Howard, you got anything to share with Members Exchange?
No, most things are pretty good. The only thing I've really got is actually a positive for a change. Put a request into staff a couple of weeks ago regarding Governor's Bay, a query from the community about Governor's Bay track, foreshore track, and was really impressed that got an answer back within about 48 hours. And the community was quite impressed with the response, and it should be the standard that the council is actually leading to rather than the unique. So I do want to thank both Pen and Liz for their impressive effort there. It was actually nice to get a response back that was clear and concise and covered everything and had a follow-up plan. So I'd like to see that actually be the standard rather than the unique. So thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Howard.
And it even had pictures, didn't it?
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant.
Nearly a whole book.
It was brilliant, and it was done within about 3 or 4 days, and it's what you expect. and it was so good.
Yeah. So thank you, Howard. Thank you, Tim. Nigel.
Yeah, just to follow on from Andrew, I think Friday was spectacular. The walk out in the dark and the beautiful clear sky. I think the thing that hit home to me really was hearing a married person give the full history the very first time, and to be delivered by Kelly Tikau, who was a direct descendant of one of the first signatories to the Treaty of Waitangi in Akaroa Harbour in 1840 was hugely significant, because it was the whole story and not, it was the true story. It was very accurate. There's a lot more to go into that story, but it was great to hear it. But it did continue on in the afternoon, because some of us went back for the second part, which was more speeches, and the media was there. Obviously, you would have seen it on TV 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. And the tree planting with the kids, that was great. You know, to see the kids all going out there and planting the trees, just to round it off and then go back to the Gaiety for tea and sandwiches again. So it was a fantastic day that flowed very, very well. Just one other thing for me, we had another meeting of the forum. The forum is an involving group of people that are there to representing different groups as elected representatives of those groups. That group is expanding. We sort of we've yet to get the terms of reference or a scope for that group. We're trying to refine it so it is very functional. We did invite several speakers to come and talk. So it's actually we had Jim Dilly talking about cruise ships and Christine Bowe talking about the wharf, and we did discuss community resilience as well and trying to get some planning going around the different bays. It's really evolving well, and it will become quite a conduit for voice going up and voice going down into that community. And that's about it for me.
Thank you, Nigel. A couple of updates, because I did miss the last meeting. So one of the updates was the Hunters Road Whero Ave approval from council. So thank you, Andrew, and councillors for helping recognise that the Hunters Road land is important to the community, and going forward with a joined up approach is the way to go, rather than selling the land lock, stock and barrel. Does not have good outcomes for anybody. So thank you to the councillors for that, and it was good to be part of that, and having Richard Sagat there as well was great. Yeah, no, fantastic. Birdling's flat wastewater discharge, that is still ongoing, and still I'm getting emails and messages almost daily. So I am liaising with ECAN, and hopefully we're going to have a community meeting discussion shortly. But in the meantime, ECAN are happy to go back to the residents, especially residents involved, with some Q&As, because all these questions are coming forward, but they're not getting the answers. So they want to go back as soon as possible with some answers to the questions that are coming through. And then it's going to be huge for the whole of Peninsula and what that looks like for the subject teams. But in the meantime, we do have people that are running out of their consents, and there is that worry. So it is a topic that I'm still working with and working with the team with. So I'll get them back the questions that I've had coming through to me thick and fast, so they can come back with answers, and I'll share that around when I get them. Thank you to Andrew Kinsley for answering a few questions just regarding NZTA. I know Andrew does talk to NZTA on our behalf regularly, and so it's probably to ask him those questions while he's here. And the last one was regarding the pine railing at Te Kupuniki. My sincere thanks to the team in Anuku for their mahi and their hospitality. Fantastic day, and it was great to see when I went back for the plantings that the team that were behind the scenes, the chefs in the kitchen, the cooks in the kitchen, still got to come out and plant the plants so they could take their grandchildren and children through the plantings and show them, hey, I helped plant that tree. Even though they've been busy in the kitchen all day, they still got a chance to come out and connect in And that was great to see, but no, well-run event, well visited, well loved, and like I say, great engagement in the community. It is just fantastic. I can't go on about it enough. And thank you for council staff for helping be behind that. I know Paul Devlin was on the ground there for weeks in advance, and his team.
He's part of the AMC.
Yeah, no, like I say, there's a lot of many different faces of council that have been part of that project. So thank you, everyone. It was great to be part of that day. So on that note, Ruben, can you close with the closing karakia, please?
Unuhia ki te uru tapinui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te aratakata. Koia rā e rongo, whakaria ake ki runga. Kia tina,